shoot a shot. I'm coming in hot. Coming in hot. Shoot that. Hey, why not? Yeah, coming in hot. Coming in hot. Just coming in.
So, my name is Cole Johnson. I am a Salem kid. Went to Sumter Elementary School, Judson Middle School.
Okay.
Graduated in '99 from good old Sprague High School, where my kids are currently attending. So they go to Sprague. 2 of my kids will go to Sprague. 2 of my kids will go to Judson, and the rest of them will be going to Battle Creek Elementary School. My wife also is a product of Salem. She grew up right around that Shirley Elementary School area, and went to Crossler and then Sprague, and she was one of my buddy's younger sisters, and just one day looked up, she got cute, so we offered to take her on our first date, and so anyway, here we are.
Yeah.
8 kids later, so Trav, we got a crew. But we're currently super busy, obviously, the big family. I run an orthodontic practice, and I have 15 employees. Great, amazing human beings. Love my work sisters. And kind of together, we've been planning over the last few years to, as we saw the rent going up in the space that we own, is like, okay, sisters, we could take this money that we're spending, and we could probably get a loan and do payment and build our own building.
Yeah. And
the first thing it says, like, does that mean we can have our own bathroom? Like, yes. Yes, Brittany. Yes, Brittany. We can have our own bathroom. Like that. Okay. Oh, is that what you want? Okay, yeah. So Brittany gets her own bathroom. No, but so right across the street from Safeway, way out south. If you go south on Commercial, before it turns into I-5 South, okay. Before you get to the courthouse, there's Safeway on your left.
Yep.
On the right, Beehive Station.
Yep.
So we purchased... There's 4 acres that go from right there all the way down to Aaron's Furniture.
Okay.
And we did that a few years ago. Then we saved our pennies and finally got enough to start building a building. And while the permit sat during COVID on the city of Salem's desk, someone finally blew off the dust and wiped away the cobwebs and put a stamp on it. So we just started construction about 4 months ago, and we should be in there around the holidays.
Oh, wow.
So I'm looking forward to moving the clinic there. It's a huge building, way bigger than we need. So we're currently in like 3,000 square feet. Our new clinic's going to be 5,000 square feet, and which we need. My poor patients have been very patient, and we're busy practice, and so it'll be easier to accommodate their needs. Way better parking than we can get now, better than our current space, and we'll be able to have some neighbors. So right now I'm just getting a ton of calls from people who are like, hey, we want to move out from downtown. Do you have space in your building for this? Even getting some calls from some chains. So it's weird to be suddenly, you're the orthodontist and be thrust into the real estate side of it. And I knew nothing about orthodontics when I started, and I know nothing about real estate now, but here we go.
Yep.
Like you get a team you trust, and you just decide, hey, I'm going to make as many mistakes as fast as possible so that I can learn, because that's pretty much the only way you earn your stripes around in the business world. You know that.
Yep, that's true. Did you figure out what design you want to do for the bicycle racks?
I did. So everyone knows it's a very cheap way to like get raise awareness, but also get some information, have an automatic online panel, and also advertise for your businesses. You're like, hey guys, I'm build about what bicyclists out there, which bike racks do you like? And so 30 comments, and someone's got a good idea, but mostly just raising awareness about the building and getting some good advice. So we did come. But every decision you make, it's going to be like, oh, why did you choose those, Cole? Why'd you choose those ones? I'm like, well, yeah.
That's the thing. Olga and I, we're gonna actually, Gary, who is starting to do our apparel, and I'm about to release his episode today. We're talking with doing like a little virtual store of some more River City swag.
Yeah.
And we talked about with him, and he was like, be careful, because if you give too many options, then it's gonna like it's almost like everyone's going to have a different kind of thing. And he's like, so just keep it limited and just maybe A, B, and C. What do you guys like? And because it'll just get out of control with A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And so that's one thing with when you put out stuff like this and go, hey, what do you think? It's like you're probably going to get some feedback, but then when you pick something, someone's going to be like, "Oh no, you should have done this," or So I saw that the bicycle thing,
but you kind of already know what you're going to do.
Yeah, honestly, the bicycle rack though, I'm not a bicyclist, so I actually thought it was a pretty good question because I kind of thought I probably would have done that too. Yeah. I don't know, maybe there's some cool system out there that I'm unaware of, other than just link it to this metal post.
Right. But I'm just thinking there's a ton of, my demographic is teenagers, and the office is now going to be in an area where there's so much population density compared to where we had before. There's hundreds and hundreds of houses going up right in that area. So there'll be a lot more people that are going to be commuting. I mean, just picture some, hipster carrying his Chihuahua on his one wheel. He's got to be able to have someplace to chain it up to. So got to be thinking about that community, which is someplace I don't have to deal with in my current spot. So but it's fun though. I love to hear what people think. I love to get, I really want to make this spot something that's super friendly to local people, like the micro local, South Salem crowd. Like, hey, what's easiest for you guys? You guys have done such a good job supporting me. Like, what can I do easiest for you? And so I even have like few panels put together, like, hey, what would be good neighbors? Like, if you came out of your orthodontist appointment, what would you want? You get everything from like, nail salon, juice bar, whatever it is that, most of the time it's moms bringing their kids in, or dads who are some of them are stay at home, some of them are working part-time, and so many people are working from home. They have a little bit more leisure convenience. And so it's been interesting to see what they say. Hey, cool, Dr. J, like, let's do this. I'm like, that's a good idea. So luckily I make my money doing braces, so I don't have to like think too much about like who would bring in the most money. Cause obviously I'd answer, my real estate agent. She's like, hey, Starbucks wants to be there. I'm like, it'd be easy. Like, sure, pull the trigger. Of course, Starbucks. But if we can do something that's support another business, local or something like that. Yeah. Obviously that's what we're going for.
Sweet. Well, that's exciting.
It is.
But I'm sure it hasn't always been like that. You haven't always been building new buildings.
No. No. Is it safe? See, it's been 12 years. I wonder if it's safe to say that I literally had to lie to get the loan to even start my first orthodontic practice. So think of it like back in 2009, I graduated from dental school. Okay. And Salem needs a ton of dentists, and there's a ton of good ones, but Salem only needs like half a dozen orthodontists. So really, like, it's very competitive. So, you go to school for a few extra years to be able to do braces and Invisalign and be trained as an orthodontist. And it came out right when things had crashed, Travis. Like, it was tough. And so some of the places that I thought I'd call some of the older orthodontists, they were like, Cole, we love you. I mean, you'd be great, but we can't, like, my 401k tanked. I can't take on another employee, let alone like another orthodontist. He's like, I know the crippling debt you have. You got to try to do it somewhere else. I'm like, I really want to be in this area, and I felt strongly about it, not just from like a gut spiritual sense, but I could see that my wife she'd paid her dues, right? She'd followed me around the country, going to my different residencies and school, and ranging all the way from Portland all the way over to Richmond, Virginia. It takes a long time, a lot of training. And her sister is disabled and had recently had a stroke because of some of her health problems, and was rehabbing, starting from learning how to walk and eat and talk again. And I just knew that just from an emotional and psychological standpoint, like, I just needed to be close to both our families, for some support. Even though Salem didn't make the most sense from a business standpoint. So she and I just decided that while we were living in Richmond, Virginia, that we would try to get a loan and just set up an orthodontic practice, which is really rare. You don't see many dental practices start de novo, and it's for a good reason. you see them being passed on. You know, Dr. So-and-so becomes the old head, the super respected guy in the community, finds some young buck, some young doctor, and he passes it on to her. And she, you know, builds her own brand and stuff. So it was different. And obviously had the great advantage of not knowing that it wasn't a good idea. Like, it was weird that so many of the good things that happened is if I would have been smart enough to look at the numbers and understand them, I wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
But I just didn't know that. Yeah. I assume, you know, there's the arrogance of the young, you know, some things you do when you're 25, you do some stupid things, but every once in a while you'll just land on, you know, you'll find a little gold nugget because you're like, you were dumb enough to look in this area. And so I just didn't realize that there was an unfilled niche for, you know, a practice like mine, and the community has been super nice and supporting us, and even the other orthodontists have been amazing, and there's plenty of snaggle teeth to go around in Travis. So we did good. So we ended up moving out here, and I showed up to the bank, tried to get a loan. I was just in my, you know, camo shorts and Hurley hat, flip flops, and I didn't know what to do. I was just asking them, and of course they just treated me like the turd that I was, and they're like, "Oh, you gotta do this." And like, "Well, you don't have any employment history." I'm like, "I know, because I've been in school." Like, "What's your debt?" I showed them, and they're just like, "There's no way right now. You got to go work for somebody." So, or you need someone to co-sign. So my mom, who, a single mom who was supporting herself, had started her own business. Basically went in and we added some zeros here and there, and they accidentally gave us a loan. So we built Johnson Family Orthodontics, JFO, right? Yeah. And opened up I think we took out a $500,000 loan to do that, and it was, I wasn't even smart enough to know that was super scary. I was like, "Oh yeah, what do people do?" Yeah. "Well, that's what you do." "Okay, I'll do it."
Yeah.
And I didn't grow up with money. I didn't even know how to manage it. I didn't know what was a lot of money. It just seemed like loans just seemed like monopoly money. And man, there's just a lot of things that could have gone wrong, and a lot of them did. But you know, the support of the community kind of made up for a lot of the mistakes that I made from a financial aspect. Because when you go to school to become a doctor, or even when you get your insurance license or you get your real estate license, do you know nobody's teaching you how to run a business? Right. It's a totally different thing.
Yep.
So you just keep making your mistakes.
And honestly, something that really resonated with me when you said getting loans was almost back then like monopoly money. I remember going to Linfield College and how easy it was to get a loan for stuff there. Yeah. Just sign right here. And so just that thought of like, oh yeah, this is easy, and then I'll be the CEO coming right out of college and make all this money and pay it back, and this will be no problem. And yeah, it was, I mean, that's not exactly how loans work in adulthood.
Yeah, they know what they're doing. They know how to get money from you. I mean, they're so good at giving it to you. They know how to get it from you. Like, there's a few companies, Travis, are so good at taking money from you, and you're glad to do it. Mm-hmm. Banks are one of them. Mm-hmm. Disney's the other one. Apple's the other one, and Nike. Those four, they're like, you want money? Yeah. Like, here's this, but you always think like, oh shoot, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
You show up to Disneyland, you're like, oh, I guess a $9 corn dog. This is what you do, and they make you happy. Yeah, they stick it. Happy. They stick it to you, and you're like, okay, I guess that feels good.
Yeah, I wish I had their business model. Yep, we're happy to overpay.
Yeah. So that was 10 years. So it was back in 2011. Finally opened up the doors, and I just remember thinking, all right, I'm ready to do some braces, and sat there for a few hours and the phone didn't ring. I'm like, whew, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I know how to do like the moving the teeth part. So I remember I just got in my car and I like drove to an elementary school. And of course the first one I thought of was Sumter. So I go to Sumter. It's like just and buzzed me in, and I was like, hey, I used to come here, and I wanted as Mrs. I think I asked about one of the teachers. Like, no, she's gone. Who are you? And I'm like, well, I'm orthodontist. And I said, is there any way I can like volunteer at this school? And I was just trying to get an in to like, just my last memory was being. So you got to realize I left Salem as an 18-year-old, and I came back as a 30-year-old. But I was still in like 17, 18-year-old land. Like I remember the last thing I did as a senior in high school. I was a preschool. Sprague had like what they called the Little Friends preschool. So where if you were a senior, junior, senior in high school, you could help be a preschool teacher, and that's what I always wanted to do. And I was involved in the Big Brother Big Sister program, and so I would go to the elementary schools and read books. And I thought, I have somebody there answer the phones. I'll just go do some volunteer stuff. It ended up being gold because they're like invite me back and again, and I'd read stories to the kids, talking about brushing and stuff, give them a little handout, and pretty soon people were like, "Oh, I guess you gave a presentation to my kid at school. Like, here you're an orthodontist. Like, can I come in and take a look?" And yeah, just ended up first year just giving a lot of free advice out, and which was fun for me. And I didn't worry about making money because my wife and I had been so good about living like students. 900 square foot apartment, no heating, no cooling, 6 kids. They're all sleeping on the floor in their sleeping bags. They each of them had like a little Tupperware thing for their clothes. And because it was so similar to the way I grew up, I didn't realize that. So many of my buddies, when they got out and they became doctors, right after they give themselves a big pat on the back, they got a car, they got their starter home. And to me, that was scary. Like I was like, no, but I can afford, $750 a month. And my wife grew up very modestly also. So we are just so good at that we just decided to do that. And it turns out the fastest way to make money, Travis, is to not spend it. I don't care what other thing you do. This applies to everyone. The best way to accumulate money is not to think of the next big idea, is to quit spending. And we, 5-year anniversary, Frosties, Biggie size it, get the extra large fries. Like that was literally it. And we just got so, once you go up the rung a little bit, it's hard to go back. I don't know if I could ever live like that again. Yeah. Now that I have like, like a toaster that's powered by Bluetooth and like a warming drawer. Like but back then, like when we were just, the chicken nugget top ramen family. Yeah. I wasn't less happy. Yeah. It was easy. Yeah. It was easy. So you just take the rungs very slowly. So we lived in that as long as we possibly could. But patients started coming in. And one of the things that was so helpful is, besides the community supporting, like, moms and dads bringing their kids in, was I just hadn't learned yet how to spend money. And so that was a huge advantage for my businesses. We were just so frugal, and I wasn't, I don't feel like I was anal retentive about it by any means, but I was just, didn't think about getting into a home. It was just like, okay, this is how my parents lived. I loved my parents. They were good providers, and I'm doing the same for my kids. And one day my accountant's like, "Oh, buddy, you should probably," the market's, but the market's such that you could probably get into a home now. It's like, really? So me and my wife were just super reticent to even talk about it. It just seemed like, do we deserve this? Like, I'm a business owner, and
so you went how many years where you were not a homeowner?
Well, I'm almost 42.
Okay.
I got my first job. Well, I became an orthodontist at age 30. Okay. And we've been in our house for 7 years. So I went 5 or 6 years. Okay. So yeah. So from when we got married till I was 35. So 15 years 14 years we just lived, apartment, small rental house, and we loved it. I mean, when you're young and dumb and you get married, you think it's adorable. You're just playing house. You're like, yeah. She's my high school sweetheart. Yeah. We're just super happy, and accidentally started having kids, and we're like, oh well, so let's.
No, I asked that because what you're saying is so important. As you're building this business, you didn't get caught up in what everyone else was doing, or I got to go get the next best thing. And you guys were content to be in that space and kind of work that as long as you could until it was no big deal to make the next move. But I think in this day and age, I mean, all you see is the fancy cars and the big houses, and that's such a pull. But I mean, that's it's that kind of stuff that I'm wanting. That's the conversation I want to have, because right now people will see the new big building that you're building.
I guess, yeah, you're right.
And not understand that it wasn't always that way. And for people that, not everyone wants to do that, but I mean, most people I meet want to grow and succeed.
Yeah.
And so that's growth and success. But to get there, you guys didn't rush it. You guys didn't have to have that next best thing, which positioned you in a great spot to then, hey, accountant's saying this might be a good time to get something.
Right.
It probably was a good time to buy with real estate costs. But as simple as that might seem, like for you telling that story, for business owners, especially new ones, that is so important. It is so important for me, I kind of out of the gates, out of college, I kind of went, and then went,
yeah.
And now I'm kind of going back up, but I learned a lot of stuff when I was down here. So now the businesses that I'm doing, I'm practicing a lot more of those principles of, hey, I know what all my other buddies are doing and have right now.
Right.
My time will come down the road to do some of those things.
Right. And aren't you glad you had those pitfalls early on? Mm-hmm. They're a lot less expensive. I mean, if you have your mistakes early on, they're a lot less expensive and they affect a lot less people than if they did now. So, I mean, it is, if you're going to fall forward, do as quick as you can.
Yeah.
Like if you know you're going to hit the deck, do it now because it'd be tough to do that. It would be much tougher to do it. Not that it wasn't tough then, but there's a certain resilience that comes from being a young woman or a young man. Like the resilience of an 18 to 25-year-old is very different than the resilience I have now. I have a lot more emotional resilience and maybe mental health resilience, but just my ability to pivot and like pick myself up and the energy was great. And I love seeing 18-year-old, 25-year-olds like just go for it. Because I know that either way they're gonna be fine. They fall on their face. Yeah. As a 23-year-old, your mistakes are not catastrophic.
Right.
Like they are when you're a 60-year-old man. I've seen business owners who it takes them a long time to get that first big failure, and you learn a lot from that first big failure, right? Mm-hmm. Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the things I've been through. When Mike was on here. In his episode, he talks about, because I did as well, but he talks about the 08, 09, he's a home builder, that he filed bankruptcy. Yeah. And he had to restructure after that. And now he's flourishing. But actually, one of the things he said, and I've made a little clip on it on my social media, is the lessons that he learned during that, he couldn't have learned in a great economy. He just couldn't have learned some of those things. Absolutely. Where he's finding this great success, knowing how to handle it, knowing what to do with it, knowing that, you know what, times might get hard again, and we got to weather that as well. Yep. But just without really going through some of those things.
Yeah. And nobody had gone through. I know it's impossible to go back to coulda, shoulda, woulda. Because I mean, even very, very, very smart people misdiagnosed it. I mean, and anyone who said they knew it was coming, they have the advantage of the 20/20 hindsight. So yeah, that time was people learned a lot, and you know, we're getting around that, Travis. There's so many parallels between what's going on right now and what happened then. Mm-hmm. It's a little different, but with the inflation, and you know, I look at my stupid grocery bill at Safeway every time, and I'm like, I'm not looking next time, but I just look every time, and it gives me a pit in my stomach. And not just for me, because I'm gonna have 8 kids, of course I'm gonna have a big bill. And man, it's the sweet guy behind me who's, you know, you can tell he's looking at his cat food and his 6-pack of beer that he got, and Sarah's like, shoot, and you can tell just the anxiety that's coming up through from the ground level of getting your gas to getting your groceries, getting the essentials. People who've gone through that before at least will know, like, okay, if it happens again, not that you avoid it to a certain extent, but if it happens again, I kind of know what to do. Right. I know how I can cut costs. I know I can survive. And then it's having gone through it and realized like, you know what, I actually wasn't that much less happy. I mean, I had a lot less fun. One of the biggest differences between having money. So I grew up with kind of the stinky kid in class. I mean, here's a good little anecdote to kind of illustrate what kind of kid I was. My first grade teacher and I have kept in great touch over the years. Her name is Mrs. Shields. She just had a little party at Our Savior's Lutheran just to celebrate. She made a little blurb like, are there any of my students out there want to get together? And yeah, so a ton of us showed up, and just old students of hers. And I was reminded of a story that I came to school one day, and our family was the family of like hand-me-downs, and sometimes we'd be able to bring a lunch, sometimes we didn't. If we did, it was like peanut butter sandwich and apple, and the Lunchable kids, like that stuff just looked so good. And I just, we didn't have a ton, and I only had like one or two shirts, and they would get kind of old and dirty, and I definitely didn't want to wear my sister's hand-me-down shirts. So every day I'd wear this puffy coat to school, big old puffy coat. I feel like there's a kid like that in every class. Now that I look at him like, I know that was me. Stinky kid who's just like, but good kid, but just, and luckily does not have the self-awareness to know that he's the poor kid. Yeah. It's a huge advantage to not have that pointed out to you yet. And I love that time in my life where I just didn't know that my dad's a janitor, bus driver, and, I grew up in a big family. We were struggling, but I had no idea. Loved my childhood. Until one day, it was all laid to bear when I showed up for picture day, and Mrs. Shields was like, Cole, you are not wearing that gross puffy coat you wear every day for your picture day. Take that off. I want you to have your shirt on when your mom sees your pictures. I was too embarrassed to tell her I didn't have a shirt on underneath. But she went behind me, unzipped it, and pulled it down, not even looking. And she looks back and like, I didn't have a shirt on. She goes, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. Oh my God. So she puts it back on. She rushes me over to the Lost and Found, finds one of those cool, remember the rugby shirts that were cool back when we were kids? Yeah. It was like, for being a Lost and Found, it was actually in pretty good shape. Puts it on me, licks her hands, like make sure my hair's all good, puts it down. And that was a Mrs. Shields, first grade teacher victory. She's like, oh, got this kid good. Yeah. Looks great for his picture. A few weeks later, I show up home, and I walk up to my mom, who's at the kitchen table with her head down. I'm like, Mom, why are you crying? She shows me the picture. She's like, where did you get this shirt? And I was like, oh, I told her the story. Of course, my mom starts crying because she's embarrassed, and she calls Mrs. Shields, very grateful that she had saved the day. And, Mrs. Shields, they had a great cry, they became good friends. And it was only my mom and I who knew that at Christmas time, every Christmas Eve or something, we'd get a little on the door, and then we'd go out there, and there'd be a bag of like Lost and Found clothes. And me and my mom knew it was from Mrs. Shields, but I don't think my other siblings did, and that would happen occasionally and stuff like that. But the great advantage to growing up like that is it's not like you don't feel like you're worthy to have a bunch of money. You just don't see it the way that some of my friends who, great people, very generous, and by all regards, like they're not snobby at all, but just had plenty, right? They were able to get, they were able to go out to lunch, and they were able to get cool shoes, and they didn't do it to flaunt it. They were just normal kids. But right. The great advantage to growing up with, you'll hear this common story a lot. People that didn't grow up with much is you don't expect much either. Mm-hmm. And so when you accidentally do come into some money, whether it's by your own luck or your own skill, in my case, it's a lot of both, I hope, but probably a lot of just fortunate series of events that helped land me where I am today. You see it as like completely extra. You're like, oh, this is way too much, But the only thing that has changed from coming from no money to having, I feel like plenty of it, more than I need. It's interesting that I'm not more happy now. I just am able to have more fun and have less stress in a certain area. Yeah. When your business, as you've grown your success, you probably know the stresses that come with money, mm-hmm. and they're very real, not mm-hmm. to mitigate them. a lot of successful people that are very, very depressed, have a lot of anxiety about stuff, but it's just a different flavor. It's different than like, okay, what are we going to do for gas and food this week?
Yep.
It's like, once your business becomes successful, it's like, okay, if I make a mistake, it's not just, it doesn't just affect Cole and Dacian, my kids, it affects all my work sisters. It affects everyone who works for me and affects my patients. And so the weight is a little bit from the top down, but
last week's episode, Chad, he shared that, at the height of his, success with his company, his construction company, he was making more money that he had ever made. He had more employees than he ever had. And he was so stressed out and anxiety, depression. He started taking medication for the depression. He made the joke on there that he thought the side of the bottle said "take with alcohol," and so he's drinking as well. He ends up rolling his truck in a ditch. The sheriffs pull him out. DUI. His son gets him from jail. He hasn't drank since then.
Man.
He's sober 2.5 years. And it was the weight of the success.
Yeah.
And I got employees now, and they're counting on me. And that kind of did that to him, and he wasn't using healthy measures to deal with that. But you're right. It's another layer to having these conversations is to say, regardless of what your bank account says, you still have obstacles. I still have obstacles. Every person has obstacles, regardless of what that number is. And quite frankly, the more you have, I've almost tended to think like the more opportunity you have to get yourself in trouble or go down a slippery path,
Sure.
or hey, now that I can go do this and this and this and buy that, and so trying to have this relatable conversation that the finances, they will help in certain areas, no question.
Yeah.
But it's not a fix all.
Nope.
And that's why I love having these conversations, because here you're saying, I don't know if I was necessarily happier back with the Frosty at Wendy's in the smaller home. It's just different, but it wasn't like, well, now my happiness level is up here. And I think that's part of the magical message is, if you can kind of find that contentment over here, then you can go anywhere then.
Yeah.
If you can find it over here, you can go anywhere then.
It is true. It is true. There's this tipping point in happiness that I guess I would put it this way. When all you have is all you need, when what you have is all you need, that's kind of when happiness happens. And I hope that people, and it sounds so cheesy, but it really is true. Like, whatever you have right now, you draw the point in time, like at this moment, is what you have all you need? And you're like, it is. Then that's when happiness happens. And then you do the exercise of, well, what if you took away a little bit? Could you still be happy? You're like, I think so. And you get all the way down to like, look, the health is an amazing commodity, and the safety of your loved ones is, next level. And man, besides that, can you have your basic needs fulfilled? And then that's kind of when happiness happens. And I just dropped my daughter off at the airport this morning. She's off to Brazil for a few years. And so I'm extra high alert for those, those dad emotional moments. So see if I can hold it together through this podcast. But I remember, I'm so excited for her to go. I'm going to miss her so much, but I'm so excited for her to see people in impoverished conditions, and it'll do the same thing it did to me when I went to the Dominican Republic and saw people in shacks just laughing and smiling. And you're like, man, if you stuck my neighborhood from even the poor parts of South Salem in that trailer park, if you stuck them down here, they would feel so down and destitute. But these guys sitting around in their dirt floor. They hear a mango hit the floor, and kids race out and just take a bite out of it, and like that made their day. Like, it's just so funny to see like what does it take for them to be happy. Their threshold is so low to get to that was a good day. Mm-hmm. Got the best mango ever. Mm-hmm. Talk to some kid, he's like, oh, it's a good day. Mm-hmm. And then some of us, you get to the point you're like, it was a good day. Like, oh man, they made a mistake at the construction site, or I signed the wrong paper and we have to switch out the type of siding, and it's a $50,000 mistake. I'm like, I mean, and I could have had the juiciest mango in the world. I wouldn't have been happy, So it's just fun. It's just funny. Like you kind of decide what is your ceiling of happiness and what is your threshold, and can you just whatever you have right now, can you be happy with that? And it's a good thing to ask yourself, because if not, then you should do some thinking. Like, okay, what can I cut out? Like, what's distracting me from being happy? And Travis, you had alluded to the more that you have, the stress feels bigger, because the mistakes you can make with a lot of money are just bigger. Yeah. They're bigger. Yeah. And they affect more people. Correct. Like when I've done that thing where it was just me and my wife, and our first apartment was a, studio apartment. We lived above somebody's garage in Idaho, and I mowed their lawn and did their irrigation stuff. And he was a doctor and just lived above the garage. And literally half of our studio apartment, you couldn't stand up all the way because it was just above their garage. And but that's what we could afford. And I was afraid at that point to spend any extra money. But we had lived in worse conditions than that, so it didn't seem like that big a deal. So, I did make mistakes at that point in my life, but they were just baby mistakes, and we could recover quickly. But and there was real stress. But the stress that comes from like trying to build your business, I see the anxiety and the reticence for people to take the next step forward, because they do see people in positions of authority that have gone through it, and they keep warning them, but be careful. But really, just make your mistakes early on and be okay with it, because you'll learn as you go. Yeah.
Your daughter going abroad, I was thinking about, which will be great for her to get a whole new perspective. When I met my wife in 2013, she had lived in Rwanda, Africa for 2012. And that was her third time there, but that was her longest time there. And it was very interesting when I was getting to know her, because she had gotten so used to the lifestyle there. She didn't like going to grocery stores here in the States. There was too many options. It was stressful to her. There was too many options. She didn't like driving on highways because it was too fast. It was too over there. They're on mopeds and a lot of dirt roads, and the electricity was shaky. So sometimes they had lights, sometimes they had candles. She had to do coals, heat up coals take a bath, a warm bath. Oh, interesting. But what's interesting is like her and I've. She loved her time over there, and I'm sure eventually we'll go over there, and I'll see where she was. But as she compares like living over there and living in the States, she just says there's so many distractions here. There's so many different things that can distract, as opposed to when she was living there. Like there could just be simple things like the illustration you're using with the mango, that was so cool because things are just
major day.
There isn't so many distractions. And so I've even thought about that, like, living here and flipping phones, and there's just distractions everywhere. There's advertisements everywhere. So I think it'll be a great experience for your daughter to go and kind of see what, a lot of different places around the world don't look like here. And, it's those kind of things. You never forget those things.
Yeah. Everyone is, there's this thing that I thought about recently, Travis. I sat next to someone on a plane, and just salt of the earth guy. His jeans were dirty, boots, and we got to talking, and I could tell he was the kind of guy that was super interesting, but was very slow to give me information. I'm usually not very chatty when I travel, but he was just such a humble guy, and he was asking such like sweet questions. Like he wanted to know about me, and so I was telling him, and he finally got me to kind of brag a little bit. And I was like, yeah, I feel good. Told him about the projects I've going on. I told him like, yeah, I just, my dad, I remember taking out garbages at this church with my dad. He was a janitor. That's what his job was. And I thought I was going to be, maybe have a lawnmower, or maybe a second one, and have a landscaping business. And I thought so small. And so as I was telling this guy, I was just like, now I'm an orthodontist. And I was very proud. Like, he got me to come out of my shell, and, he did a good job of doing that thing. Some people are just good about making you feel good about yourself. And right as we get off the plane, he hands me his card, and he's like, call me if you ever need any advice on anything. And plane took a while to deplane, and so I pushed him for some information. Turns out he's worth $1 billion. He's just one of those guys that he does lumber for the entire, Alaska, he was trying to describe it to me, but you could tell that he wanted to make sure I understood the context of that. I could go to him with like advice about stuff, because he understood, because he was the humblest guy. But I was like, I thought I was successful, but there's always somebody that is just way richer than you, no matter what level you are. And there are people that make that guy, like, if he I'm sure he could sit on a plane next to someone like there's way more money than him. But there's always somebody way richer than you. And there's always somebody way poorer than you. So wherever you are, it doesn't matter as much as you think it does.
Yeah.
Being a big deal in Salem, Oregon, you're going to wake up the next day, you're actually still in Salem, Oregon. So, it's like Travis here. If you guys don't know, he's a hooper, man. He's a good hooper. And he could eat my lunch anytime if we played on 101. But I'll go to the church, my little church league, and like there's another 40-year-old guy. I'm not good compared to anyone else except for like a chubby 40-year-old guy, and I'll cook him, right? Yeah. So everyone's better than you, and everyone's worse. Somebody's worse than you. But then Travis goes, he's telling me about, before the podcast started, for you audience out there, he's telling me about just got toasted by some kids from Willamette. Hey, no matter how good, how rich, how handsome you think you are, there's someone who is
someone badder out there. I was reminded of that last night. I'm still salty about it.
Yeah. That's funny.
So back to, you got a $500,000 loan. You started your practice. Which I love hearing that you started doing the little kid thing, giving out free advice, just because I think a lot of times when you start something, that's what you have to do.
Yeah, and I didn't know that. I just thought that, I honestly thought it was being nice, but it turns out it was an amazing business decision. I had no idea, but that it was. You're right.
It kind of, and I definitely relate with you when you say that your industry, it's normally like this guy owns it, and then this younger guy's coming in and taking it over,
or father son, or
family
there's
thing.
A few father daughter. Like, it's really cool that they have a legacy they can pass on, and the guy can retire, and the new young doc can take it over. But
so you just started, because like what Olga and I are doing with River City, we're just starting from scratch.
Yeah.
We didn't buy someone's book of business.
It's a different beast. It's a different beast.
It is a different thing.
Yeah.
So that's how you started yours?
Because you've gone through this before. The branding, okay, how do you position yourself in the market? Like, why would people go to you and not somewhere else? There's plenty of people that do insurance. There's plenty of people that do dental work and braces. And so this is a whole psychological thing. You try to put yourself into the public's shoes and like, what am I doing here? Like, what service do I provide? And why would they come to me? And it's different, because if you come on and you take over another brand, then you might still rebrand it, but you have built-in clients. And so starting de novo, you still have to have that first one that says, and they're going to know, like, hey, just I'm just starting out and I'm going to take care of you. But you take care of them and you realize that patients beget patients, clients beget clients, and taking care of people is by far the best thing you can do. You can't skip that step. There's a lot of cool things you can do to market yourself, but you can't skip the step of taking care of whoever's in front of you. Like, you see what you're looking at, hear what you're listening to, and be where you are. I always tell myself those three things: see what you're looking at, hear what you're listening to, and be where you are. because you'll get busier, and you got to create that good habit. Because once you get busy, you'll be on the phone, you'll be trying to do other things. You're like, nope, I can't. I got to concentrate on this conversation. This is the person. They're paying me money. I got to listen to whatever their complaint is. Yes, Mrs. Jones. Yes, Sydney does have a gap in her teeth. I promise I will close it.
Yeah,
because she's paying you for your expertise and for your time and for your attention. And it's so easy to get distracted. But man, taking care of that person, that is rule number one of being especially a startup. Because when you have a startup, Travis, you actually have the time to do that and do it really well.
Yeah.
And that's the one thing you can do better than any other business out there is that personal touch.
Yeah.
And you just try not to lose that.
Yeah. What have you done not to lose that as you've grown? Because growing also presents new challenges, and not wanting to lose that personal touch and not losing what kind of made you get off the ground in the first place.
You find an Olga, right?
Yeah.
You find someone who shares your vision, and they share your vision, and they want to be part of your team. And so I had my first hire. Her name was Amy, just an amazing human being. And she understood things that I didn't understand. And I had the skills of an orthodontist that, she didn't have. And so we just teamed up like Batman and Robin, but we had the same vision, which is super important. And the only way to grow and keep that personal touch is surround yourself with other people who are willing to first have the personal touch themselves and then hold you to that standard. Mm-hmm. It was Amy who was like, hey, Cole, like that. I feel like, I know you're tired. You kind of phoned it in, that exam. That family deserved a little more. I was like, you're right. It's tough to hear, but yeah, you're right. I know we're getting busy, so let's make our appointments a little bit longer. Let's do this and try to get back to, that thing. But, and it just, but it is hard to do sometimes.
Yeah.
Easier said than done.
Yeah. When did you start? Because really what I knew of you was these funny social media, like, check out this orthodontist doing this dance dressed up. Has that always been you? Or was that like years ago when social media really started to be a thing? Did you say like, hey, like this could be like some fun, great marketing for what we do? Or has that just always been, you just videoed it now?
Well, I always had thought like being an orthodontist is, I never intended to be an orthodontist. I always had it in my blood to be some type of entertainer. I saw myself as like a Jimmy Fallon type, and that was just the naivete of a young man who thought he was pretty charming and pretty good at music and pretty, funny, and not as much as he thought he was, but still enough where you could put out content and it would get gobbled up by people who didn't have high standards. But so I had like a YouTube channel, had my MySpace page. I had a band, always has been in a band. My dad, by day he was bus driver, janitor, jobs like that, and by night he converted himself into the singer and guitarist for like a Doors, Zeppelin, 70s cover band, and I just loved going to his shows, and he taught me how to play guitar and taught me a lot about music. And so me and my family, I guess the one thing I can say with great confidence is I don't feel any arrogance in saying that my family has very strong music, like we're very good musically. It's kind of like a language that we can all speak. My kids can sit down and listen to a song and just kind of play it. So there's some of it is like hard work, I guess, but a lot of it is just like sometimes there's an aptitude, and people in my family have had it, and music came easy to me. I've always kind of been in a band, and so for me, I felt tied down by being an orthodontist, and it was like I'll do this stuff on the side because I have to. Turns out it was actually pretty good marketing too, because people remember that kind of stuff. But it really wasn't.
That's what I first literally, before I knew people that knew you, that's what I knew of you.
But really, it was just intended to be like kind of an outlet for the creativity. And, I got good advice from people who, I wasn't good at, I think they were just being kind to me because I did want to. There was an internship at 30 Rockefeller Center, to do an internship for Saturday Night Live. And it's back then when you send in a VHS tape and stuff. And I actually, I got through the process. I could have gone out there and done it. What you're doing is just basically taking coffee to people and like, but some people have gotten their start that way where they just, you're like a little turd David Spade and people think you're funny and you're a good writer and they ask your input and pretty soon you get like a job like editing the writing and pretty soon they ask your input and you're at the writer's table and then pretty soon they think, okay, you actually got some chops, or do some stand up. And in my mind, that's what I wanted to do. But Travis, everyone has a plan until they fall in love. Everyone has a plan until they fall in love. Everyone has the best plan in the world.
Another hot take right
Dude,
there.
everyone has. How many people are like, oh, I know I just got divorced. I'm not ready to date again. Deborah comes in. She's like, oh, yeah, I'm engaged. We're getting married in Cabo. Like, yeah, Deborah, because everyone has a plan until they fall in love. And that one kid, never getting married or never going to have kids. But me, it was, accidentally fell in love with my wife who I think she was a little bit nervous because she knew that I wanted to have a big family and she didn't really grow up in a big family. And so I just remember her saying, Cole, I know you want to have a big family and, we're going to get married but I don't feel like I could grow up like you guys did. She's very honest. She's the sweetest woman in the world, very humble. She wasn't saying that I needed to put her in a big house on the hill. She's saying like, I think it'd be stressful, especially, and she's right. It would have been very stressful it used to be you could have one parent working a 9-to-5 job, Travis, and you could get in a little house. That is just not the way it is anymore. So she's smarter than me, and she said, we could have a big family, but I guess, and you got to picture like a young 19-year-old girl saying this, like, you'd have to be like a doctor or something. And I remember, I was like, what kind of doctor? She's like, I don't know. I literally went in. I was playing. I was doing track and returning punts for junior college. And I went into the counselor, and I knew I was going to lose my scholarship because I wasn't very good. And he's like, "Well, you can stay here. You just got to get good grades." And it's like, "What do you want to do?" It's like, "I want to be a doctor." He's like, "Well, what kind?" I'm like, I don't know. So we just started taking the classes. After being a straight C student in high school. Literally straight C student. Like I never got a B again because I just knew that like, okay, now I have a reason. I wanted to do all these, be in a band, do all this cool stuff, be the starving artist and maybe do some landscaping and those are all great things. I mean, I would love to have been able to do all those things, but once you fall in love and you find your person, you're like, you find yourself being motivated in ways you weren't before.
Yeah.
And so being orthodontist, I wish I could tell the kids out there that it's my dream, it's my vision. I've always thought I would do this and then build a building. And that's not true at all. I've tried to do best wherever I've landed and happened to be an orthodontist. And it's a great vocation. But man, there's still that performer inside you and you need to have your fix every once in a while. That's why you see all these, whether got one of my best friend, she goes out and she's got to do her wakeboarding, right? Or she's got to be on the dance team. My other buddy's got to go down and play old man hoops. They still got to paint. There's a lot of us are earning money doing the thing that's not our passion. And that's not to say we're not passionate about serving the people.
Right.
But there's not many insurance agents that really could look in the mirror and say, this is my passion. Their passion could be people. Their passion could be
correct,
part of the mission. But really, no matter how much you love your job, there is something inside you. There's a creative side that wish you were doing something else. So you get a podcast, you start doing other projects. You join, you do some volunteerism, whatever it is. But it's important to feed that side of you. And you probably know this, I know you know this, that actually helps you in your business. Not the X's and O's of where you're really generating income from a podcast. What you're doing is it makes you better the next day. You feel refreshed because you're doing something that plays to your strengths.
Right. No, yeah, literally I'm about to post it with Gary. We talked about that and I was saying, I haven't met an insurance. I have friends that are in insurance. I've not met someone that is just passionate about selling insurance. And so for me, when Olga and I, a couple months ago, as you had asked when we got into this office in January, And as we're, brainstorming and like, how do we want to build our brand to reflect us and our style, our vibe, speed, whatever, I I said, I have an idea, and it might be my best idea. I've had lots of ideas, but this one might end up long term being the best one I've ever had. And she said, "What's that?" I said, "A podcast." And she's like, "Oh, what does that mean? Like, I don't get it." And I was like, "Well," I said, "think about it. If I start having, at first, it really was, let's have local business owners in here. I'll interview them about their business. We'll kind of make kind of a commercial for their business, if you will. It'll be another way for us just to meet new people in the community. We're new. We're terrible at cold calling. Like,
there's no way to be good at that. Just say
yeah. Like, it's something that I've worked at other insurance shops, and they're like, Trav, everyone loves you, but then it's like the moment you start talking about insurance, you just turn into this other thing. And I do. Like, I don't. And so I've just thought, I hate leading with, "Hey, I do insurance."
Yeah.
Now, with you saying that a lot of us have something inside of us, I would say for 4 or 5 years now, I've been telling my wife and a few close friends, there's something in here and I don't know what it is, but there's something else I want to be doing. And I've had, as weird as this might sound, I've had some dreams or visions, if you will, of like, and dreams are weird because it's never a straight line. It's never like, here's the exact picture. It's just like this thing where you're like, I kind of see it. But I've had these like dreams of like speaking to people, connecting with people. Mm-hmm. But I didn't see the microphone. Right. I didn't see the but it was like, there's this thing where I want to have these conversations and speak with people and then connect other people. And so it started with, well, we'll just local business owners make this kind of thing about their business. But it's kind of, after the first few, it was like, wow, this conversation is getting a lot deeper about these people's lives. Mm-hmm. And it's becoming less about their business and more about, what's all this other stuff that they don't know about Cole? What's all this other stuff that they because they only see a certain thing.
Exactly.
What is all this other stuff? And I'm a pastor's kid. I've watched my dad network and care about people and love on people. And so I thought, well, how do I mesh all that stuff? I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business guy, but I also really care about people. So how do I mesh those things? And this podcast, it's crazy. I mean, I think a couple interviews ago, someone had asked, they're like, "Man, what'd you spend on all this stuff?" And I was like, everything in here is about $7,000. And I sold my car that was paid off to go and buy all this stuff so I could just get it rolling. Yeah. And I just financed another car to make monthly payments so I could do all this stuff. Like, quickly, just let's do it now. But what's amazing, and speaking to your point, this thing is fueling me. I love randomly going up to you at Hoopla and going, "Hey, I'm Trav. This is what I got going on."
It's a way easier approach than
way easier. Yeah. And because, to be honest, I'm passionate about it. Mm-hmm. So when these things, like, people see that, and so it's. I think when you say like you kind of wanted to be a performer or whatnot, I think I did too, honestly. Yeah. I think I did too. And so this is a way to kind of have that a little bit. And I think I'm going to start asking every guest that comes on here, if you weren't doing this, what would you be doing? Yeah. Or what would you always want to have done? Or because with your social media stuff, I thought, and also when I knew you were coming on here, then I started looking at your Facebook stuff and seeing how musical you and your family are. And me and my wife were talking about that, the musicality, and the performer and whatnot. And so then I was like, there's got to be a story with all that, like a story of social media, and they all play every instrument. And so, those are the kind of stuff that I look forward to, like, hearing. Like, you almost went and worked at SNL. And
probably not, but in my mind, in my arrogant 18-year-old mind, like, I had another way to do it. And who knows? I mean, there's no way to know if you could have or couldn't have. And the likelihood is you and I could have been doing a bunch of different things and been equally as successful. But no matter what we chose to make how to make our money, we would have had something else inside of us that would have been like, no, a well-rounded human experience trumps being the best at anything. Our culture is very different. When I was out in Virginia, my wife and I were the only white family in our entire apartment complex, which was huge. There might have been a few others. We just didn't know them, but it was very diverse. It was certainly there's Black, African American. There were a lot of Koreans, a lot of people from the Middle East. I mean, there were so many different ones, but we just happened to be the only ones. And it was so interesting to see what each culture valued. For instance, there's certain culture out there that it was very important to them that I'd see them a lot as patients. And it was like they'd identify very early that my daughter's the violinist. She does violin. She is going to be a violinist. Everything has to work around her being, and this girl's 11 and she's a prodigy. She's great. And then, and I had a daughter close to the age, and I thought, man, I just want her to have a few seasons of soccer under her belt, be pretty good at math, do some Girl Scouts. I think one of the American values is being very well-rounded. We like when our leaders maybe golf a little bit, and maybe do things that we like. It's endearing for us to see people to try to cook. And I don't think when we look at someone who is just an absolute savant at this thing, at least in our culture, and it could be I'm speaking for a small part of us, but I think it's pretty, I think it's a very American, because of how the cultures have all meshed here. We love people who are willing to do a lot of different things, and whether or not they're good at them is besides the point. But we love when people put themselves out here and and not to be the jack of all trades, master of nothing. But it's just I think most American parents of kids, no matter their ethnicity or background, really do love if their kids just try soccer. Okay. Right. Or just try joining this club. Hey, do some choir. Right. That kind of stuff. We like it. Right. And that's what's valuable to us, because innately they feel that we feel the same thing without never having spoken of it. I want you to make sure that when you grow up, you have choices, and you'll choose something to make money, but I still want you to be able to be comfortable singing if you want. Yeah. Or showing up and playing some weekend softball if you want. Be comfortable in any situation. I think that's one of the hallmarks of being a good, I think one thing that we share as being American parents is we want our kids to be comfortable in any situation as much as possible. And so we want them to be well-rounded, as opposed to being you're right. Occasionally there are other persons their boy's going to be in the NBA. Right. He's going to work on his handles all day long. So he's going to put a fire. And those kids, you hope they do, because if they're not, then they're like most kids, man, I had a lot of my childhood I could have been fishing. Right. So. Right. Well-rounded human experience is something that most people can be a fan of. Yeah. For situations like this, where you're tinkering around with teeth all day, but you still want to play some music, or you're selling insurance to make your money, but man, you'd love to have that thing that makes your soul sing a little bit, right?
Well, and then now you're blending them. Like you probably
they do get blurry sometimes.
The videos you made. Now you look back and go, well, shoot, that actually was pretty good marketing. But you probably weren't initially thinking oh, this will get a bunch of traction, or people are going to talk about this, or literally me. That's what I'm like. Yeah, the guy that makes those funny, the orthodontist that makes those funny videos. That's funny. And I don't personally know any orthodontists here in Salem. But if someone was to say, do you know any, I would be like, that dude that makes those funny videos. But that stuck with me. Right. That's
when your marketing plan is. People ask me sometimes, what's your marketing plan? I've offended so many people for so many different things. And that's part of the comedian in me. Comedians, for some reason, have this license, no, I can say something offensive, but it's a joke. And either you're the type of person that says, yes, it's an art, yes, you should say things that are like cross the line, like, or you're the person that's like, no matter what, you should never do it. So when you're caught in between, like being a professional and trying to be a comedian too, like you're going to say a lot of offensive things. And I have, but when people ask, so what's your marketing mantra? It's like, well, I don't care what you think of me as long as you're thinking of me. Like, so it worked. So the ridiculous videos have nothing to do, don't speak anything to my skill level.
Yeah.
Don't speak anything to my character. In fact, they could make me look like a total dweeb, but it worked because I don't care what you think of me, but you thought of me, didn't you?
Right. Well, and then, I mean, I haven't had your services, but the people that I know have loved what you do. So obviously when they go,
right.
like, you know what you're doing and you do great at it.
With the great caveat that you have to be at least trying your best, be decent at what you do. Because besides taking time to spend, like we said, the first thing for an entrepreneur to be like, hey, you really just got to spend time with people, figuring out what they want, be good listener.
Yeah.
No, be where you are, hear what you're listening to, look at what you're seeing, and being that person for them. And then the second would be like, you actually got to really be good at it.
Yeah.
You try.
Yeah.
Keep getting better.
I want to tell you my puffy jacket story.
Yes. Two puffy jacket stories in one podcast. This audience is in for a treat.
Man, I've been thinking about this. Was
it a starter jacket, Travis?
Man, I used to have starter jackets. I don't think it was a starter jacket. It was, I think, kind of an ugly brown puffy jacket. And we were living in Modesto, California at the time. I was probably 11. And I'll never forget this because my mom was embarrassed as well. We went to, I believe the store was Sprouts Ritz, and this little grocery store, almost like a Walgreens or something. And so I go to the little toy section and I'm looking at these Hot Wheels. And I will say my mom was like heading out the door and she was like, you want to come with me? And I was like, yeah. And I think I just threw some goofy slippers on and the jacket. So we go to the store, I'm looking at Hot Wheels, and this lady comes up and she asked me if I had a parent in the store. And I was like, yeah, my mom's, I don't know, over an aisle or two. And she was like, what are you looking at? And I was like, oh, these Hot Wheels. And she's like, which one do you like? And I was like, oh, this one. And she was like, well, why don't you grab that and let's go talk to your mom? And so I get it and we go over and the lady says, hey, do you mind if I buy this Hot Wheel for your son? And I believe my mom allowed that, but felt very embarrassed. And I remember asking her, because like you were saying, like you didn't know you were poor.
Yeah.
And I remember like my mom had to say, well, the reason she did that is you looked poor. Like we didn't look like we had, and we really didn't have money either. But it was funny when you were talking about the puffy jacket and not knowing what, and I didn't, but I had a blast as a kid. I loved that neighborhood. There's a bunch of other not white kids in that neighborhood that we played sports all the time in the cul-de-sac, and I had no idea that we didn't have money.
Yeah.
But I had a great time all the same.
It's great. I do miss that. I mean, having a good childhood is so independent from what you give your kids. And man, having said goodbye to my daughter today, all those things come rushing back. Like, okay, did I do okay as a dad? Like, and I'm not thinking anything about when she asked to use my credit card to get some Dutch Bros, did I say yes? Or did I pay for piano lessons? Or was she able to go to that basketball camp? None of that has crossed my mind. My parenting was independent of that. Did I spend enough time with her? Did she feel safe? Did she feel loved? That kind of stuff. And really, when you take away the things that you give to your kids or the experiences you have to take them to Hawaii or Disneyland or buy them the cool presents on Christmas. I mean, kids don't actually care or remember. Mm-hmm. So to all you parents who are struggling to give their kids everything that the Joneses are giving their kids, I'm here to tell you, they're not worried about that.
Yeah.
Like, do they It's just about your relationship, the time you spend with them and stuff. And it's a beautiful time to be so independent of money, like have a time where you're independent of money and social issues you have to stare in the face as an adult. And it's important that you do that. When you understand them, you have a moral obligation to kind of confront them and figure out how you're going to deal with some of the inequity or inequality in any community. That's true. But there is a beautiful time where you don't worry about it. Like your friend, do they like Transformers? Because you do too. Mm-hmm. You don't care anything about where they came from. Mm-hmm. You don't care anything about what their daddy does or who their mom is or where their grandparents came from or what their first language is. Dude, you guys like Spider-Man? You guys are best friends. Meet me under the big toy. We're going to chase the cute girls around and throw bark chips at them. Yep. That is a great time. Yep. And I think that some parents are so critical of themselves because they're not. I mean, for every story like Travis and Cole, there's a story of, my kids. It's going to happen to my kids. I've warned them about this. They grew up in Dr. Johnson's kid. They grew up in a big house.
Well, I was gonna ask you. Yeah, now with your 50 children, and raising them differently than you were raised, has that been a struggle for you and Deja? Of how much? Yeah, for
sure. Because I think that I don't know how to do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but this has been my best effort. I tell my kids often, like a lot of you guys are gonna raise your families like I grew up. Like one of my daughters is likes a boy, and she's old enough to be naturally that they think about ending up together. I'm like, yeah, just so you know, like when you guys start your own families, if you choose to do that, then the likelihood that you'll end up living like you do now is just pretty low. I mean, if you want to, I hope you do, but what if you want to continue your, like when my son's Antonio, I'm like, Antonio, what if you want to be an artist? Mm-hmm. It's like, and you instead of it being your hobby, it becomes your job, and you struggle. Like you got to be okay with not having a slide in your house. Yeah. Like, it's just one of those things, and I can honestly say, I'm not just saying this to sound magnanimous, but it's my kids' success. It's not really like I'm thinking, oh man, I hope that they find good jobs and stuff. I'm like, I just hope that they find a job where they can meet their needs and be happy with it, and then they have enough time to do their stupid music videos or their podcasts or their men's softball league. Like really, there's so many different versions to what is considered a successful, happy life. So I'm trying to preempt this and explain to my kids that what they're experiencing now, especially my younger kids, what they're experiencing now is just, there's a chance. I make sure they're hyper aware of other families that are, I hate the word struggling. Like they're not able to go on vacations. Yeah. They're like, so I tell them like, when your dad grew up, little Cole, like he went to the coast for like day trips and stuff. Mm-hmm. The first time he went out to eat was when he was 17. That kind of stuff. And this is not one of those nights where we would never be like, oh shoot, we're late, let's just go get Taco Bell. It just couldn't happen when I was a kid. And they kind of look at me, they're kind of like, it's interesting to them, but I hope they remember it and they don't feel bad when they're like, you know what, college isn't for me. I gotta spend a few years getting my license doing this, and they'll, whether they want to or not, everyone's going to go through those years where they're going to quote unquote struggle, but they realize like, no, that's normal. Not everyone, because of the way this is, like we can't have complete equality with, we can have equality of opportunity. And that is really the goal. Do we have equality of opportunity? Can anyone attempt to do what they want to do? Mm-hmm. But we can't force equality of outcome. Like not everyone can become an astronaut. Right. Like just not going to happen. So wherever you end up, can you be okay with that? Right. And but it is interesting. I'm glad you asked that question because I think about it all the time. Like, are my kids well prepared to grow up? It doesn't work the way we're like, the immigrant family starts out from nothing. The second generation grows this, and third. It doesn't grow exponentially. Like every once in a while, it tails off, and then cousins and siblings, they kind of they find their own demographic stratosphere where they find their nest, and that's where they end up. And everyone can find happiness at every tier, but it will be interesting to see. And I hope my kids at least remember what I say, but it's very hard for the younger ones to understand. This is a little bit embarrassing, but I think it's a good anecdote to explain kind of the difference between my older kids and my younger kids. So my younger kids, they only know this house that we've grown up in. It's a big house. Got a basketball court, super cool. And me and my wife are super proud of it. We love our house. And we spent 12 years in an apartment. So we're so excited to build a house, and we went a little nuts, right? Build a house it's our dream house. And my daughter comes home. She's like, Daddy, I was at so-and-so's house, and their TV is the size of our computer. I couldn't see it very well. It's like, oh yeah, well that's actually a normal sized TV, sis. Like that's like we have a big TV. Our room's so big, it's kind of stupid because we stand further back. And it's like, but you were probably a lot closer to it. It's like, oh yeah, like so. I mean, just trying to explain like that kind of stuff, and it just, she wasn't being snobby, right? She's just a kid, but she just pointed out like, yeah, it's different. And so I wanted her to know that that's more normal. What you're living in now is kind of a weird situation. While as my oldest daughter, who went off to Brazil this morning, she remembers helping me set rat traps. And she remembers sleeping next to, the Tupperware where she'd get up and she had two outfits and she'd change into the one, and, go into the laundromat like that. And so she has a very healthy perspective because she will have gone through all the rungs of the ladder. And so wherever she ends up, she'll understand how to find her happiness. But the kids who, there's plenty of kids that grew up in great circumstances, and I hope that they don't, when they feel like they're struggling, I hope they don't feel like there's something wrong with them. Yeah. They just, you can't, just because your parents were well off does not mean you're going to be. And I just hope that you can find your little place and be happy with it.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things about success now, right? Like you're describing this potential challenge because of success. Of, well,
expectation.
My oldest, kind of got to live a certain way. My young ones, this is all they're used to. Our daughter, I co-parent with her mom. And I've thought about that same thing because I'm like, Riley's like the only kid, for the most part, she gets whatever she wants. And we've talked about like, how much do we give? And my wife, her dad was a pastor as well. So both of us grew up with humble, childhoods. But I've thought about that. People that have success and resources, like, I don't know. How do you, like, as a parent, like, how do you parent that properly? Because I know some really wealthy people that there's been trust funds that, oh yeah, they just blew through those couple $1 million. And so that's always been an interesting dynamic for me is, on one side, you look at the other side and go, must be nice. But then that other side, I've heard a lot of stories of, well, because of all these resources, they got addicted to drugs or this or that. They blew through all the money. They didn't learn a work ethic. Now they just keep asking for money rather than go get a job and work hard and do something yourself. So I don't know. That's just, it's an interesting dynamic as a parent of like, what is that sweet spot of not.
Right. And you do worry about the kids who do it's like we mentioned before, Travis, when you have a lot of money or you have access to a lot of resources, your mistakes come hot and fast and big. And so can you imagine if I would have had a lot of money as a 17-year-old, there's probably zero good things I would have spent. I would not have been able to handle it very well. It makes me admire all the more those families that have managed to stay at a very a certain level of wealth for a few generations. Like, it'd be good to interview them. Like, okay, so there's a few families in town that have amazing successful businesses and they've gone through it for a few generations and there doesn't seem to be any decline. It's just kind of a steady rise along with inflation. So they're all been doing well generationally. That's very rare. I mean,
what discipline, like what kind of discipline it takes to sustain that.
Right. And that's something I don't have the knowledge. I'm kind of guessing right now. We're definitely a new money family, and you know, so I'm just preparing my kids. Like, I don't know what's going to happen, but listen, Dick, you'll just, and I want, it's been clear to them. For some reason, I've just had this feeling that I shouldn't, not that it's wrong to help your kids out, but once they leave the nest and in an emergency, they can always reach out. And I would always help them. Mm-hmm. But it was so cool to see my daughter. She could have asked for anything and I probably would have said yes. Mm-hmm. But she went and she handed out flyers so that she could run a little kids basketball camp to make some money. Mm. She worked at the courthouse, just a summer job, told them I'm leaving on my mission. And just to see my kids understand that they believed me when I said, hey, when you leave, I just need you to take care of yourself as much as you can. You'll be surprised at how different you will live your life than me and your mom do now. But like, it shouldn't surprise you that you'll be just as happy.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the having fun, like I said, money, the only thing it really helps you do is have more fun. It doesn't help with happiness. It helps you have more fun more often.
Yeah.
And you do take on a different type of stress.
Right.
So I think it's very flipped to say that, money doesn't buy happiness. To a certain degree, money takes away a lot of stress, and it's great. So, and then I'm very proud of at least my oldest few kids who've understood that I do want them to work. Mm-hmm. I want them to get jobs and stuff. And, mom and dad, we have our charitable endeavors. My wife has a big charity that she runs, and I have things I like to do. But those funds are sacred. They're for people who really causes or people that are underrepresented. But my kids will take care of you guys. So just you take care of yourselves, and maybe if we can all meet and go to Disneyland every 5 years or whatever, we'll have some fun together. But don't count on like a big inheritance type of thing. I'm not passing on anything to them of significance.
Yeah,
it's not my goals to create generational wealth and have one of my kids like take over the family business type of thing.
Yeah. What foundation?
So my wife's, she has a charity. It's called Always in My Heart. And it's for women who have experienced miscarriages, especially, infertility or stillbirths. And so what happens is through her website, a lot of people will Google. I mean, it's one of those things that most women will experience it. Either their sister will, their coworker will, but at some level you'll experience it. If not personally, then someone close to you will. And not that it's taboo to talk about, but really I think it's hard for people, especially there's a whole community of people who are pro-life, pro-choice, and that kind of political stuff goes out the window. But when you're expecting a baby and it's a little diploid zygote, then it becomes a fetus, and then it becomes this, and there's some psychological, emotional point in your life where it becomes your baby, right? And who cares what the science says? Who cares what the social media says, or who cares what lawyers say? You are expecting to have a child, mm-hmm. and when it doesn't happen, there's that expectation that just mm-hmm. oh shoot, anxiety steps in. I don't know if I can have one. Maybe they happen multiple in a row. For us, it happened 3 times in a row. And they should just tell themselves, when we have the recourses, this is what I'm going to do. And so sure enough, when people have that, they Google it, her thing comes up, and they click on it, and they're able to solicit help in the area, references doctors. My daughters and her, usually once a week they'll send out a bunch of gift packages for Rebecca so-and-so from Illinois who had a miscarriage and she lives alone, or a friend wants to send something to her through here where it just has some keepsakes. It has a little diary, it has some medical information, has contact to someone she can talk to, because when something happens, doesn't matter if it's cancer or if it's a car crash or if it's a miscarriage, or when it comes to trauma, there's only one thing that is common across all the studies that helps, and that is finding someone who's been in a similar situation. You want to talk to them. Mm-hmm. You want to talk to mm-hmm. them. If you've been through an employee suing you, rather than talk to your best friend, you want to talk to another employer who's going through it. Mm-hmm. When you're going through bankruptcy, it's cool to talk to your mom, but you want to talk to someone who's going through it. And so really her network is basically trying to carry people through their loss by hooking them up with a whole, Facebook group of people that are like, that sounds like mine. Mine happened at 8 weeks, 12 weeks. And for some reason that is just very therapeutic. And so that's her that's her cause, and she's committed, and she's done amazing things with it. So it's been very humbling to see that some of the success I've been blessed with, you know, I do think it's because of some decisions I've made. I feel like I'm a pretty smart guy, and I've tried hard, but really I can see that so much of it has come for the greater purpose to make sure that she can. My wife has the important business, you know, like fixing teeth. Listen, you don't have to come to me. There's many good orthodontists in town. I mean, I'm probably just middle of the pack as far as like skill and experience, and there's some great guys, but there's just, when it comes to really important things, like if you're having a miscarriage, and you just always in my heart as something that you can go to. And I love that my business has like a higher purpose. Not that the braces themselves, it's just like a family trusts me, they give us money, we know a lot of certain portions just going to go right into that charity, so that she can, you know, help more and more people. So it does put a little more pep in my step. When I get tired of my job, I just like, oh wait, remember, I'm not doing it just for me, I'm just doing it, and I'm not even just doing it for my family. It's like, hey, Dacia's got her thing. It's been her dream that speaks to the type of person she is. It's been her dream to kind of do this for, you know, be that resource for women. And so it's been cool.
Good. Yeah, that's one common of the people I've interviewed thus far, which most of them have been business owners. There usually is some kind of
cause. Yeah,
like Gary, who I'll put out today or tomorrow. He almost died from COVID. He had a really bad bout with it, and after getting through that, and he talks about that on the episode, he because he has his apparel company that he screen prints and embroiders and whatnot, but he kind of felt this new, like, I need to do more for the community. I need not just have my business and make money from that. And so he started a foundation, named it after his grandma that has passed away. And actually his event is on Sunday. And what he does is he gets a bunch of donated backpacks and stuffs it with school supplies, and then has people register that need that. And I think he said the first year he did it, there was like 300 backpacks given out. Like he could have used more. Very cool. And so this is happening on Sunday. And actually my buddy that does all the editing for this is going to shoot that event and make him a commercial for it, to help put out that awareness more. And part of this podcast, I'm trying to put out that kind of awareness to these different local charities and foundations, and kind of put a face to them and a video to them, and to help different, whatever it might be, whether it's miscarriage or my kids need supplies, to get that, because I mean, I love that. That's when people that's what people light up. Like watching your face is different when you start talking about your wife and this foundation. And I get it, because now everyone has to listen to me talk about this podcast. Actually, I have skin. Skin is. Have you had Ryan on? Well, maybe. I don't know if he'll do it, but he is so mad at me right now because he wants me to talk about insurance all the time, but all I do is talk about the podcast. But that's what I'm passionate about. That's what I love. And he's like, no, you got to talk about insurance all the time. And I'm like, no, it gets talked about, but this is what I really love doing. But I love kind of getting that, seeing everyone's got something there that they get, but this is what I really love to do. Yeah. And I do a lot of this stuff over here because it helps stuff over here, helps your wife be able to have this, and, do that and seeing that joy. And, so those are the stories that I love bringing out in this.
Yeah. And it's interesting because it doesn't help my business. It only helps me. And so it is self-serving. I'll be the first to admit that I love the fact that part of what I'm doing is supporting that. And even when I don't have time to, nobody wants to talk to me. I mean, there are some dads that have reached out and said, hey, I'm having a super hard time. And I can talk to them. And there's guys that struggle with their pregnancy loss because it's different. The woman's going through it emotionally and physically. The guy's vicariously going through it, but he still has real feelings. And And although I have been like a firsthand help to some guys, most of it is I love my job more because of it has a bigger purpose, because nobody thinks about their kids' straight teeth when things get real. And so it's good. I think the common ground that we can all find is like, man, if you can do something a little bit bigger, it helps you in your job, just that motivation. Because sometimes when I don't feel like getting out of bed, like, that depression that happens to everyone. And I'm fortunate that my bouts of depression have been micro and, not clinically depressed, but there's not a human being alive that doesn't have those days where like, I just cannot do this. I don't want to get out of bed. After I dropped my daughter off at the airport, I literally laid in bed, Travis, and I was like, this is going to be very hard. Like it's like having another one of my wife around from an emotional standpoint, not just like do the dishes and like do some rides for me and, be an ear that I can talk to and all the wonderful things that my wife does and help me out with the business and run errands and just be one of my best friends. I just felt just sad and that pit in my stomach for myself. And the last thing I want to do is come here.
Yeah.
And I just realized like, no, there's other reasons why we do this stuff. And I'm sure my daughter would have been the first to say, no, Dad, get up. It'll be good. It'll be good. It'll make you feel better.
Yeah.
But there are very, very, I don't care who you are. I'm glad that there's a mental health awareness that's kind of been flooding our society enough to make it so you don't feel bad as a guy, as a dude, to say, just don't feel like a good provider today. Don't feel like very strong. Don't feel very like, I don't feel like the rock that at least society tells me that I'm supposed to be all the time. And guess what? My girl doesn't care. She still thinks I'm wonderful.
Yep.
In fact, it helps her to know that her guy has hard days just like she does, and it gives her a sense of empowerment when she can, scratch my head and be like, "It's okay, baby." And I'm like, "Yeah, well, it's fun to be on the receiving end of some compassion every once in a while, because one of the hard things is, as a guy, and you know this, you do feel like you want to be the rock, and there's some obligation to do it, but eventually you kind of want to be the you want to lean against a rock. And I love that. Not that there's been a strict role reversal, but it's okay to take turns being the rock every once in a while. You just hope that everyone has a rock to lean against, and so it makes the people in your life that are acting as the rock so valuable, because there was a time when I don't think guys felt like they could do it, and like our dad and grandpa's generation. And is there any doubt in your mind that they felt just as depressed as we did? And I don't know how they did it, but I'm sure glad that I don't have to be as strong as they were.
Well, and keep it in. Almost every person that has sat there, that is another common theme that is coming out in almost every one of these interviews, is depressions and mental health stuff. That I've suffered from depression. I've suffered from anxiety attacks where I thought I was dying. One time I went to the emergency room. I thought I was having a heart attack. Next week's episode, I think, will be Jason Conrad, who owns the semi-pro basketball team, Salem Capitals. A big part of his story, actually his passion, is mental health awareness. He will speak about being medically diagnosed bipolar, and how that's affected his life. But a big part of him buying this basketball team is to bring mental health awareness. That is a huge thing. And that's one common theme that almost every person that I'm talking with, that's the other relatability thing, that, hey, we're all going through this stuff. We're all feeling a lot of these same things. And let's talk about it. Because, hey, most people, honestly, I don't know you. I know you from a distance. I look at you and go, this freaking guy is always smiling. Oh, it seems like And for someone like me, I like my daughter tells me to smile more. Like I have people that are like, Trav, smile more. And I'm looking at this guy with his perfect teeth and I'm like, does this guy ever have a bad day? Like that's what I would think from my perspective. Does he ever have a bad day? And so for you to come here and be like, man,
today was a bad day.
I really didn't even want to come today because I dropped my daughter off and I'm feeling some type of way.
Yeah.
Like, but that's kind of the, I don't know, that's what I love about, let's make this human. Let's make, like, I don't know, the success stuff gets a lot of play. It gets a lot of, wow, look at this, or wow, look at that. But
and it is. It's fun to talk about, but it's not fair. It's not fair to talk about all the successes unless you really, really understand where it comes from. Because if somebody sees the success of some of your guests, and even me, for instance, they're like, you hope that someone would identify with, like, well, I clearly, like, they'll identify much more with the guy who struggled than the guy who just got the perfect family, got the great business. And that's just not fair to put it in those terms, because it would count out a whole bunch of people that are right in the middle of the tough stuff that thinks that man, it doesn't sound like I'm on the right trajectory to be where he is. And like, oh no, you are.
Yep.
You are. You know that there's no one ever has this straight line up. It's always, there's ups and downs, and right now I can't even tell if it's an up or a down, but it's, I just know that getting up the next day and finding a reason that's bigger than your actual business, finding a reason that's different than you. And one of the greatest things I learned is I know that self-care gets a lot of play, and I think it's important, but man, forgetting about yourself and doing something good for others is probably the fastest way that I've found to kind of get out of my depression. So much of my depression has just been when I'm so inwardly focused, like, man, this stinks for me. This is going to affect me. This is hard for me. I am this way. I am this. I am this. And when I get up and when your kid hands you a pop-up book and you want to crawl into a hole, and you're like, I'm going to choose to not forget about it, but just put my kid as priority first and help someone with their homework. And by the time you finish tucking somebody in, reading a pop-up book, calling your friend that you should talk to, and you give them a pep talk. What you're really doing is you're giving yourself a pep talk. You're reading yourself the pop-up book. You're saying your prayers to yourself instead of your daughter. And at the end, you're like, I do feel a little better. Mm-hmm. I do feel better. I got out of my own space. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, well, I'd say often, I'm my own worst critic. And people have said some horrible things about me. Yeah. But I said, trust me, I said worse things. I've said worse things about myself. The only difference is if my critics were right, I'd be in jail right now. But because I'm right, I really, really, there's such a high standard that people who are driven like you and me, and so much of our audience, our standards are very high for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And instead of treating us like we're ourselves, we should step away and be like, what if I was my best friend? What would I say to myself if I was just my own best friend? You'd say, you're good, man. Yeah. Take your time.
Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Isn't that funny? Because you're right. I mean, I've done it my whole life. Honestly, my circle of friends, it's actually been one of, if not the biggest hindrance in my career.
So much better, more encouraging to your friends than you are to yourself.
Is I've looked around, compared myself, and it's hindered me, because I'm like, well, they're doing this and they're doing this and they're doing this. And it's like stunted my growth. Yeah. And now kind of the stuff I'm into, I've said this multiple times, I'm 40 years old and I finally feel like, okay, I'm finding what I'm actually passionate about. Yeah. 'Cause I got these close friends that are off doing this, that, and the other thing. And I'm wondering, like, why haven't I found kind of that level of success? Well, I'm not them. Yeah. I'm not them. Yeah. I need to find out what makes me go, what makes me, and so, yeah, but it's funny, the part of, if we were talking to our friend, we're like, bro, you're killing it, man. Exactly. You're doing fantastic. Exactly. And yet we're like, I'm not doing enough. I should be doing it differently. I mean, it's so true. I tell my guys, I'm like, right. You just wrote a book. You just did, like, you're killing it.
Yeah. But what is it about those people that actually have that insufferable arrogance where they they are. You know those guys that aren't doing as well as they think they are, and they're always just like they have to brag to you. Either one of two things has to be true, Travis. They don't actually believe it, and they're trying to get you to validate them.
Yes.
'Cause everyone has that guy that like,
Yes.
bro.
Yes.
That I was there. You did not score that many points.
Right.
Or I've been in your business.
Right.
It's not. No.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So like, but then the other part, you feel sorry for them on one hand because you're like, oh, they're probably just like compensating. But on the other hand, you admire them like, dude, if I could be half as encouraging to myself as you are to you, I'd be great.
Hey, I've actually said that to myself, like, because I'm more pessimistic than I definitely fall on that side of things, not optimistic. And got some buddies that have kind of just that that good attitude, that can do, that, you know. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I've had a little bit of this wrong the whole time. Maybe I need to start, like, you know what? I am doing well. You know, like I am, rather than being so hard on myself. But I walk that fine line with what you're saying, where they're like, hey, Trav, it's not as cool as you think it is, bro. Like, you know, so I'm like, let me find that balance of like, okay, I'm doing good, but I can keep pushing. Yeah. But I don't want to.
Here's a good exercise for your audience. I want everyone who's listening to be like, if you talked or if somebody spoke to you like you spoke to yourself, they'd be toxic. You'd probably cut them out of your life. So you either got to be a better friend to yourself, because you can't cut yourself out of your life, because that is the ultimate. I mean, that's the worst case scenario. And if you do want to cut yourself out of your own life, then you got to say something to somebody. That's when you know it's getting bad, because I mean, the very mental illness, mental health at its least healthy results in suicide. And so don't think that you're just gonna get over it. Like if you do the exercise and you're like, if somebody spoke to me like I spoke to myself, I would have blocked them on Facebook by now. If you're that way and you realize that you can't get out of it and you really want to, what happens, I think, is there's the internal Cole and the persona Cole. Like persona is the person that I act like, but the real Cole is like my soul. Like when they don't work well together, like at worst I want to cut one of them out of my life, and that's dangerous. It's a dangerous thought. And I've never been to the point where I really have thought about it, but I can see when it comes up in other people, and that's when you really have to be brave and be like, all right, I'm toxic to myself, and so I have to cut myself off, or I need to get help. And the correct answer is always to get help. Always get help, or else you're just putting your pain on other people. And I know it's very harsh, and I don't want to blame people that have committed suicide. I've had the biggest surprise as an orthodontist has been how many funerals I'll go to, how many funerals I go to of young men and young women who are, I know how amazing they are. You could find a jury of their peers to convict them of being awesome every time, but they, for some reason, were their own most toxic person. Instead of realizing that they should cut toxic people out of their life, they learned that lesson, but they decided that they needed to remove themselves. And as harsh as it is to say, they just pass their pain on to other people. So really, if you really want pain to go away, you'll tell somebody, and that's just the first step. And but yeah, if you can look at yourself and say, I'm a pretty good friend to myself, then you're in a good spot. But if you're like, man, if I talk to myself, or if somebody talked to me the way I talk to myself, they'd be gone. Then...
Hey, I have not heard that before. I like that. Especially because of how a lot of times I talk to myself.
Oh, yeah. I'm a real D-bag to myself sometimes. But other
I mean, to be honest, like, part of this podcast is therapy for me. For a lot of my adult life, have felt like a failure. I have businesses that have failed. I have a marriage that has failed. Friendships that have failed. And I think I'm beginning to talk to myself better. Yeah. And I don't know if I've never kind of heard it put put that way, like if you had someone speaking to you and speaking into your life the way you're speaking into your life, wouldn't you cut them out? Yeah. And the answer is yeah. I mean, at least you should cut them out. But I've never thought about it that way. And I think, like I said, I'm the guy that's like, well, I don't want to become that other guy you were talking about.
Right.
That guy that's overcompensating.
There's degrees of self-awareness. On one side, you have someone who's so not self-aware. Like sometimes you're in a conversation, you can tell that they're not listening to anyone. They're kind of their own little world, and they think they're great, and they're kind of hard to be around because they don't really absorb the sociality of the circle that you're in, and they're so obtuse to what's going on that they'll probably never have problems with mental awareness, or mental health, but like they're just kind of a little bit obtuse to social situations. Yeah, but that's rare. That's very extreme. The other people is the person who literally cannot listen to other people because they're they're so inwardly focused. Do you remember the first day of like sophomore year when you set out your clothes and you knew exactly what you're going to wear because you knew in your mind, Travis, that everyone was going to look at you, but then it takes you 10 years to realize that no, everyone was worried about themselves. That would have been the day that I could have come nude and nobody would have noticed because everyone was so worried about their own starter jacket, cargo pants, and Velcro pro wings. So there's degrees, so and like true. I think there's a healthy balance of being you're inwardly focused to a point, but you never lose sight of what is in the field of vision, and like you take what you think about yourself as if you would another good friend, but it doesn't define you. Mm-hmm. Everyone's had that moment when a friend's like, just so you know, like I think, they tell you something and it's not critical, but it's just like, it's truth. And you're like, whew, well, I mean, but they're a good friend and you trust them. You're like, okay, I take that. I see what you're saying, bro hug. And you're like, you deal with it. Right. And that's how you should regard yourself. Yeah. But some people, like when a thought gets into their head, like that's the gospel. Like, and it becomes a little worm and it just grows and it becomes a cancer inside their own mind. Like mental health is just, it's cancer of the mind. And before it grows, you got to get some therapy. And so my best advice is to listen to people who love you. Mm-hmm. It's been hard for me because if you put yourself out there on social media, you'll have complete strangers that will call you, say horrible things about you. And you'll be like, okay, well, in my circle of people that know me, they're way outside. They know my persona, but they don't know me. Do they love me? No. Do they care about me? No. Should I care what they think? No. I still do because I'm human, mm-hmm. but I shouldn't. Mm-hmm. And then, if you check those boxes, like, do they know me? Do they care about me? Or do they love me? Like someone like my mom or my kids, they'll be honest with me. I should believe what they say, mm-hmm. and they consistently tell me things that are real about myself, both good and bad, mm-hmm. but they're the people I can trust. I could trust my wife to tell me if I was off base. She's been brave, even when I had, problems with my own self-esteem and could fly off the handle occasionally when I was, just a young man. She was still brave and she still called me out when I was doing something stupid or, said something that crossed the line, and she did it out of love. And so the more someone knows you and the more they care about you, the more you should listen to them. But you do get to this point where you don't love yourself, you don't care about yourself very much, and so you should not listen to yourself. Yeah. And then if you're like an online person and you think, does this person know me? No. Did they care about me? Did they love me? No. Then really try your hardest to just cut them out. Yeah. The best thing about the internet is it gave everyone a voice, and the worst thing about the internet is it gave everyone a voice. So just remember, in the human condition, the people who are closest to you, people you trust the most, people who love you, carry you, know you. I mean, you should trust them. Yeah. Trust what they say, both good and bad. If it's critique, they'll do it in a place of love, and you should believe them. But if it's a thing, they tell you that you're beautiful, they tell you that you're good enough, they tell you that they like this about you, you should just, when in doubt, you should believe them. They're a better authority than your own self sometimes. Yeah. Well, that's good. Thanks for coming on today. Thanks for coming, even though you didn't want to come. I appreciate you being honest about that. Honestly, I appreciate you. You don't know me. You could have easily given me some excuse why you couldn't come. So I appreciate, you being transparent about that. Well, I love the invite. I will say I'm so glad I did, because it's therapeutic to talk about it. So, don't make the mistake of thinking that I am good at, the advice might seem sound and seem sage, but it doesn't mean I'm good at taking it. And so it's been, I kind of recommitted myself to take my own advice. And so this was one of the opportunities to do that. So I appreciate you.
Good. Well, thank you. Yeah, with especially all the early people, we'll eventually, maybe next year, the following year, we'll do a follow-up.
Yeah,
we'll see how the new building's going, how your tenant, what it's like to be a landlord.
We'll try, but the chance that things get heavy again is just really high.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks, man.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah. Thanks, dude.
That was good.
Yeah.